Okay, so I'm going to take you through an example of how we found growth in a mature category by introducing Australia to a new segment. I'm going to take you through the learning plan from a client-side point of view. My emphasis will be on the qual, and I will take you through both the considered, well-planned qual that we did at the start of the journey, and the nimble qual we found we had a need for as time progressed. And look, as you go through it, this room is going to think of some really brilliant alternatives we could have considered, and I'm going to start by saying you are correct. But honestly, I think, regardless of some of the options, what really made this work is because of winning behaviors of the team. And I'm just going to try and talk to you a little bit about the courage and the trust that the team showed as we went through it, and why I thought it made such a difference. Ah, very good. Okay, that worked. So does anybody know what this is? Yeah, okay, good. Your qualities, I know you want to talk, that's okay. So a platypus, right? Built like a duck, body like an otter. I'm an American in Australia. So my first confession to this group is I didn't study to be qual. My background was originally in analytics. That was what I studied for, that's where I started. When my director came to me and said, hey, Amy, I have a great opportunity for you. We're actually going to transform you into a brand researcher. My second confession to this group, at first, I didn't really think it was such a great idea. I was very lukewarm. I was like, I don't know, I'm really comfortable with the numbers. And I was walking down the hallway with Nancy, and she turns to me and she says, Amy, this is gonna be great, because you hang out with creative types on the weekend, right? You know them. Now you get to give them feedback, and they're gonna love it. Oh, okay. Take the opportunity. It's a couple months later. I am out with friends. I do turn to a friend of mine who's a copywriter. And I said, hey, you know, David, guess what? I've got a new job. And actually, what I'm going to be doing later this week is I'll be taking creative ideas through in focus group. And in a nanosecond, it became obvious that he never really knew what analytics was. Sounded boring, tedious, probably something he pitied me for. But he did know what it meant to take creative through focus groups. And the expression on his face immediately changed. And he goes, you're going to become one of those who takes the soul out of work. So there it is. It's day dot. I've got my first performance review. I would arguably describe it as it does not meet expectations. And I think it's one of the most valuable things I've ever heard from someone. Because I think he's got a point. I do think we have to be careful when we conduct qual, that we have to make sure that our job is to be the bridge between what it is that the team is trying to do and what the consumer sees. And we are empathetic both to the consumer and to the team. So my third confession is just so you know, so that was quite a long time ago. Since then, I have conducted in-home interviews in trailer parks in Arkansas. I have conducted ethnographies in Mandarin and in Spanish. I have been fortunate enough to watch people clean their toilets in 4 different countries, and it has been one of the great honors of my life. All right, okay, finding growth and mature category. My apologies for the cryptic blurb. I was trying to avoid a situation where the competitors would be all too obvious to them what it is that I was going to talk about. So what is this? It's a picture of white bread. Wonderful, delicious, soft white bread. If it's 2014, who here would want to invest in white bread? Have you ever heard of someone who says the white bread makes them fat? Right? Yeah. What if I tell you that in 2014, the rate of people who were claiming to consume bread daily was declining in double digits? And what if I tell you the price on private label had recently rolled back to $1, and the marquee items in your portfolio are selling at $5.45? Is that a small challenge? Okay, so that was 2014. This chart is from May 2018, and the revenue per NPD from Tip Top is worth, on average, 81% more than the NPD coming out of the next guy. Is that okay? Maybe. All right, this next one is actually, full disclosure, my favorite page in the deck. What you're looking at is that same 2-year period. That gray, that elephant, is the weekly dollar sales of the branded items in the core. And that sexy snatch of a green line, That is the value of the NPD that at some point had been vetted through our online community. That green line is worth $104 million. So I ask you, now you know that per NPD is worth 81% more than the next guy's NPD. Is that a reason to have a seat at the table with the retailers? You're in insights, right? I have one of the things I have is an online community. Can I use this to say, hey, the value of this work is now worth $104 million. Is that a reason to think twice about it? Maybe. It's interesting, in that green line, about 6 months before that number was the first time we got the results back from an Advantage survey. Does anybody work with Advantage here? Because it's Advantage surveys in a couple different markets. So in Australia, we have this really, it's an eye-opening experience. It is very valuable, where the retailers will actually rank sort all their suppliers by ops, by finance, by marketing, and by insights. They tell you how satisfied they are with your work and how you are relative to everybody else. And at this time, we were ranked number 1 in Australia. So, for what it's worth, what I'm about to take you through is something the retailers found some value with. Okay, so behaviors. I said I was going to talk about behaviors. Somebody in this room is looking at this and thinking, oh, it's 9:30. Why is she talking about numbers, right? We're qualities. Because actually, I'd argue one of the behaviors we have to bring that is our duty, if we're not lucky enough to be working in social research, is we have to have the business acumen to understand what it is that helps the business make money. So when I have a new member of my team join, the first month, works pretty light on. Their first priority is to have inductions with everyone, find out where the bathroom is, the way it works, get back to your desk, right? That kind of stuff. But at the end of the month, my request to them is to come back with a report. How does Tip Top make money? Because in this business, there are 2 of us who are working in bakery. The other guy, just so you know, they don't have an insights department. In fact, they barely have marketing. They're taking all those costs out and they're putting it into price. So we have to be able to justify what is the value of our worth. And I honestly believe that I need to have a team that when we get those weekly sales reports on Monday, we're keen and we're engaged and we're trying to understand it. Because the difference between qual that makes an interesting story and a qual that makes a difference is whether or not you as a researcher have the ability to be able to understand how it can translate to results because you understand what is technically feasible. Okay, so the big idea, Tip Top sandwich thins. All right, here is the learning plan. 9 months between the formal kickoff and the day that the managing director gets on a plane to London. And this is going to be the big request for funds. So we don't yet have a brand team that we're going to hire for this. We don't yet have a category team. We haven't yet broken ground, right? So the learning plan, shortly after kickoff, we start on qual. That qual begins with a workshop that was an all-day immersion exercise where we unpick the positioning of competitive products. After that, we go into a 2-week food diary with consumers. First week, we're looking at different segments of consumers and understanding how each of them use red. I'm not going to talk about it in great detail, but no, we have an attitudinal segmentation. We can identify people through a typing tool, so we know the people who are carb concerns and people who are not, right? Second week is a deprivation exercise. We take these people, some of them are very heavily engaged in bakery, we rip it out, and we're listening for what are the pain points, what is most difficult. So when we offer this alternative, we want to make sure we have a benefit that responds to those greatest pain points. We had 6 focus groups in Australia, 4 focus groups in New Zealand. After that, the big part of this learning plan is we would do a Bases 2. Has anybody done a Bases 2, worked with Nielsen? Anybody from Nielsen? So BASES 2, it's a wonderful concept use test. It comes with a forecast for how this product is going to go in model. I'd certainly run a number of these back in the States. This was the first time I was doing this in Australia. It was the first time we were doing this in bakery. And at the time, it was not uncommon when you talk to consumers, about 10% of them were going to just be really, have a strong emotional reaction to the very thought of trying to encourage people to eat more bakery. They would reject it outright. So before we did the concept to use, we did a BASES snapshot, right? Which is a concept test just to kind of run our idea through the Nielsen pipeline, and so we could kind of start to see how this was going to work for us culturally. Everybody okay with the learning plan? Look like it might work? Maybe? All right, let's see. Oh, come on. First reveal. Ah, there we go. Okay, so something you need to know about bakery. So it's a little bit different as food products go in that it's fresh. And so what gets to be a bit tricky is we don't yet have the capability to be able to produce this in Australia. So that means we have to get somewhere from overseas this product and be able to ship it frozen to our warehouse and then thawed just before we show it to consumers. So I said from a client-side perspective, and I'll be honest, it turned out it was really tricky getting as much product as we wanted at the time that we wanted it. So the focus groups were delayed, I think, 3 different times. We finally get it. We finally get a box. We wanted 5. We got a box, right? We get it to Australia. We put it in the freezer, and guess what? Somebody accidentally left the frozen door open. Does anybody know what happens with bread if you freeze it, thaw it, and refreeze it? Don't do that, by the way, if you do that at home. It does terrible things to the product. And because we didn't have nearly as much as we had wanted, those focus groups that we had in New Zealand, the prototypes that we used, or the stimulus that we had in Australia, Andrew had to take that, put it in the office fridge, then put it in his carry-on, take it over to New Zealand, and that's the same product that we used in the focus groups. Was that at its best? It was terrible, right? It was absolutely terrible. All right, let's see. I must be pointing poorly. There we go. Okay, so all this work, all these workshops, it's an hour and a half into focus groups. It's a fairly extensive multi-week exercise and question for you. You put the product on the table. Have you ever worked on an exercise where you put something on the table and you wish you could take it off? Like it was radio silence. This thing looked terrible. So what do you do with that insight, right? So you can do all this work on positioning and what would be the most compelling claims, but when the consumers are finally looking at your product, they're rejecting it, right? Do you walk away from that? Can you justify it? Can you explain it by the fact that this product has been, well, it wasn't in great condition when we showed it? Or do you try and lean into that and somehow use that as an insight for what needs to be most powerful going forward? Let's see, first video. Fantastic. Okay, so what we decided to do is the one key element of the elevator speech that came out of this, as we were talking to people about the fact, look, we've got the health claims are cool and compelling, but none of this is going to work if we don't make it telegraph the taste and the versatility of this product, which comes through the softness. Because we were having difficulties, we could see that if people looked at it and assumed it was going to be a cracker, then despite the health claims, that would not be enough of a reason for them to change over from, to work with the inertia. And they would continue to just use white bread. So what we have here, we couldn't do this immediately, and we had to wait until we got that second box of product, is a video that we would embed into the concept test, right? So rather than just relying on the words, we are trying to demonstrate to consumers the fact that this thing is going to have the versatility and the softness of bread. And you can sort of infer that it's going to be thinner and therefore lighter eat. And in fact, let's see. Ta-da-da. Okay, cool. So the creatives, this idea would stick with Fins throughout the lifetime of this product. The creative gets the idea and they've made gold with it. And it's an RTB that we have kept alive across channels and across campaigns. So that learning plan, that little fire there was meant to capture the expression of PD when they realized that the freezer door had been left open, right? Bit of an emotional explosion at the moment. We couldn't get the product as quickly as we did. That shifted the time of the qual, and that has an effect on the snapshot. The snapshot doesn't go into field as quickly as we wanted to. Didn't yet have that video, but do you delay it? You tell the MD to get a later flight to London? No, you're like, okay, now at this point, look, we're 6 months into it. We're feeling really excited. What could go wrong? This is going to be the solution for people who are concerned about the healthfulness of bread. This is going to be the answer. Has anybody ever had a conversation with sales where they want to increase the price before you get the results? Right? So what do we think is going to happen in terms of the results? Red. So look, the way BASES work, if you're not familiar with it, is a fantastic service. There are 12 factors for success. You can be outstanding on a number of different elements, as this product was. But if you're risky on credibility or other metrics, then you're deemed as not ready for launch. And that's what happened with this product. So it became really evident that we still had too many claims. We need to really clarify the language of the benefit, the taste, and the texture. And there was actually some work to be done with the insight statement. So we have this video ready. Is that enough? Again, that BASES 2 is a significant investment for us. Now, it is 14 days away from us. So what do? That's meant to represent just the tension of the team at the moment as we were making some of those decisions. All right, so 14 days, 3 days to do planning, 7 days to do recruitment on our online community. So I was talking about that segmentation study. We have a typing tool, so we know ahead of time what are people's sentiment towards bread, whether or not they're anxious about carbs. We know what brands you're loyal to. We know what types you prefer, right? And so we very carefully pair these 3 online chats with people who we thought were going to be representative of the target. And who we used, and this is where I think this also talks to behaviors. Remember that qual we did a couple months earlier? It was amazing. I still work with Andrew. I am honored, and I am lucky that I have found him. We didn't get him. So online chats, just 3 online chats. Another head of insights would say, get the team to do it. Didn't do that. I went to somebody else who I also would highly recommend to someone because her work is amazing to moderate this, because I hired her as a red team. Is anybody familiar with the term red team? So red team is essentially you bring on someone who has no exposure to this product at all. The rest of us have been involved with this for 6 months, right? I'm not going to change PD. I'm not going to change the innovation team. So she's going to come on, and I trusted Karen to ask us really hard-hitting questions about who we were trying to target, right? What was this going to be used instead of? How are we expressing this? And I use her as much for that work and that 14-day period leading up to the chats, as well as for her ability to moderate it. And it's a testimony to the professionalism of the team that I work with, both at the beginning and in this, is that we could be okay with this. Yesterday in the session on social listening, we had this really interesting conversation about the fact that it feels sometimes on the commercial side, we don't work together often enough as a team. This is an example, I think, of where, we need to lean in and trust that there's a role for everyone. And even if we don't work exclusively, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard to hear a client doesn't work exclusively with one person. It all works if we play to our role and we work together regularly. All right. Okay, so we've had the online chats. Do we have a massive presentation with the MD? He's about to go to London, right? Beautiful deck. No, right? We've got to get this thing into field. So I had a conversation at the end. The chat felt really comfortable about the power of that video. Made changes yet again to the reason to believe in the insight statement, and we've been playing around with the pack design. That night I wrote a memo. The next day the head of innovation wrote the test, and we put it into Zappy. Now, BASES is amazing, and I highly recommend Nielsen to anyone who's interested in them. But this is a situation where we needed results, not in 6 weeks, not in 7 days, not in 3 days, but in 8 hours. So, we've done quite a bit of work. How's it going to go with Zappy? Red, right? So they didn't hate it, but it was significantly above the global average on neutral. And so you're sitting there as a team, you're asking different questions. First of all, you're asking yourselves, okay, is this confirmation bias? I've been working on this for months. Do I not see what's wrong with this? Or you ask yourself, oh, it's a global norm, is this appropriate for Australia bakery? So what do? So on Zappy, there are lots of different options. You can do lots of different things from a product testing point of view. The one that we chose was one that provided 8 open ends, asked of 163 people. So I read them. I looked at the heat map. And so much was working so well. People understood the taste and texture of what we were promising. The claim that we had picked was going to be the most compelling. They could get what we were trying to infer, so what was going wrong? What we found was a number of people were saying things like, well, gosh, this seems expensive for 3 in a pack. It's not 3 in a pack, it's 6. In all those 40 iterations of the concept, we diminished, accidentally, the count. We made a mistake. And look, here's the thing. So that video was one of the key components of the learning plan. I have to be honest in putting together this presentation and tell you that that typo is the other biggest cultural impact from this study. It's not easy to stand in front of the marketing saying, okay, look, there was a mistake. It's not easy, honestly, to stand here in front of you guys and tell you that there was a mistake. But I actually think that's one of the behaviors that I would highlight as a win, right? There is a need to be vulnerable. If our role is to stand there and get the consumer to be vulnerable, we want her to be really honest, right? And if you have in the back room a sales guy who is absolutely dead certain he knows exactly what the client wants, if you have a creative team that is committed to an idea and doesn't care, how do you get them to come to the table and be collaborative if you aren't willing to be, to be vulnerable yourself? But all too often in this situation, if you're a perfectionist know-it-all, I don't know, I've been in here now for a couple of decades, and often I don't find that's what the team needs when it's in a tense and difficult moment. So we made that mistake once. We haven't made it again in concept testing, which is good. That's fine, right? It's okay to make a mistake if you learn. The other thing that we've done, though, is I would argue we've learned a lot around pack architectures in the years since, and it's actually one of the differences that makes an advantage versus us versus the other guy. All right, okay, so what do? Rewrite it one more time. Do we go into bases too? Yes, we went in. All right, so you get the results, right? It's you, it's the MD, it's the guy who found the freezer door open, it's the guy who left the freezer door open. They're all in the room together. How did it go? I wanted to read you the results. Consumers rallied to the promise of low calories and light texture without compromising taste, softness, and freshness. Thin's distinct proposition is deemed outstanding in terms of appeal. Post-use, 81% of consumers say they would definitely or probably buy Tip Top Thins at healthy repeat rates. But honestly, just to go back to the numbers, I think the proof comes in the pudding a couple years later. So it's launched. It was the #1 driver of category growth that year. Now you have a sense of how big that category was, right? Because that green snake was worth $104 million. That gray elephant was just our branded sales. So how big is the category? Right? It's big, right? We were the #1 driver of growth that year. The next year we drove 30% of the growth in sandwich alternatives. 1 in 5 households tried it that first year, and we did drive trade up. So consumers went from a situation where they were spending about 18 cents per serve to 52 cents per serve. I feel really good. So yeah, okay, so key net takeaways and discussion points. Honestly, we can talk about the techniques, but for me, sitting there looking at it, I think it really does come back to behaviors, right? It's about being able to be that conduit, that bridge, who understands enough business acumen that you can interpret some of the amazing work that we're doing and making sure that it's something that is tangible and commercial to the team. While we're there, we're looking for matching signals between what she's telling us and what we're capable of achieving. And throughout all of this, right, Some of the most important things are the cup of coffee at 10 a.m. or the conversation in the hallway you're having at 6 with the team to talk about, okay, so what are our assumptions? Are we hearing what we expect? What have we not considered? And do we have a plan B? With that, I'll open it up to questions, but if I could just say, if somehow on day 2 there is a quant in the room, and if you go back and your boss says, hey, I've got a great career opportunity for you, you're gonna have a chance to watch people clean toilets, take it.